It's taking longer than I expected it to. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. Okay. So we're going to talk about symbols and how to work with them in ArcMap. So the first thing is, if you notice that you have a page, like a box on your screen, then you know you're in layout view, which is this little tiny button down here. In order to work on Symbology, we're going to switch to the data view, which is this other little tiny button down here. These are important buttons, and we'll get into that probably another day. But for today, we're just going to talk about the different ways to symbolize things. One of the reasons I wanted you to get the data on your computer is because when I work with it or show you examples, I'm just going to use the exercise data so we can kind of get an idea what you'll see. So if you go to data and then MGIS data, or if you go directly to your MGIS data folder, you'll see it's already nice and laid out for you there. You can go into Oregon and then into that geodatabase that we're going to be looking at. So there are geodatabases and shapefiles, which I think we can cover another day in more depth, I think. But basically, if you click on these little pluses, they'll just keep expanding into different things. 3 dots is a point file. This is a polygon, like an area file. These things are rasters that are, we can talk about that in a minute. But then sometimes there's groups of things, and that's what these 3 cards on top of each other means. So obviously transportation is going to have airports and highways and things that are related to transportation, whatever. They'll review it in the exercise. So we're just going to let's look at airports and then highways and then water bodies. All right, so all I did was I clicked on the GIS data that I wanted, and I just dragged it over into the main area. And we could add anything in there. I mean, I think just to see what a raster looks like, I added in slope, right? And so the rasters look like continuous data that covers the whole screen, right? Basically is the definition of a raster, as opposed to something where these water bodies, if I turn them on and I take the selection button and I click on one, I can just click on one at a time, and you got water bodies. So really all I wanted to talk about was how to symbolize these things. So let's take airports, just a regular point file. Go down my list here. Basically, you can click on the little symbol here and go in and change the symbol, right? At its simplest level, you can just pick one of these things. The homework talked about the category and the quantity and like divergent types of symbols. We can do that for a polygon or a line or a point. So we can show you how to do that like for all 3 of them. So let's say I go to airports, and what I did, I think I showed you last time, I just double clicked on it to get to the properties of it, which you'll spend most of your time looking at the properties of a layer. And these are all settings within this one ArcMap document. So something important to remember is that the GIS data doesn't know how it's symbolized. You can do things to have it remember that, but usually it's just, every time you bring it into a new ArcMap document, you got to re-symbolize it, right? So symbolizing it, you're going to go to the properties, and then you're going to go to this Symbology tab. And then usually you're going to be working with these different types, right? This is basically what we're talking about. This is all I want to show you about. Is features, categories, quantities, charts, and maybe multiple attributes. Features is just one symbol at a time, right? So every symbol in this GIS data, have it be the same thing, right? So all of them are green squares, and I could make all of them appropriately an airplane for an airport and hit OK, and then they're all airplanes. But if we wanted to, say, make it by category, then we can click on the categories, and we can say we want a different category for each unique value in there. for the, let's say, type of airport. And then I would hit the add all values here, and you can see it would give me the types of airports that are on this map: international, municipal, and regional. When we talk about the category of things, right, the answer was like, it means that if you have a bunch of data and you have multiple types, but it has nothing to do with like quantity or like a number, it's just this is one type and this is the other type. It's category data. So you can see here, if I was going to do category data, usually I would do like different colors, like a random set of colors, one for each dot. So if you go to the color ramp, there are good category color symbols. If you open it up, this drop down, and you scroll up, and you'll see this top one is usually the best for random colors, basically. So once you pick a color ramp, it'll just apply to all your dots. These dots are pretty small, so what I would do is right click, say properties for all the symbols at the same time, and I would just increase that, maybe 10. And now you can see they all have a different color. And then if I hit OK, you see the different types are colored by the type. Now, that would be an example of category data, right? Then if we wanted to do some quantity data, let's say, first of all, one of the ways to tell kind of what you can symbolize is if you go to a layer and you right click on it and you say open attribute table, you'll see all the data about each item. Now you can see the type here had different types, right? 3 different types. But then total ENP, whatever that is some number of things, probably passengers or something at each airport per day, maybe. And you can just look at these numbers, and we can then sort them by the numbers, right? And so that's what they mean when they say quantities. So quantities, we can do those other things that the reading mentioned, right? Make a graduated color map. So if we did a graduated color map, it would be a different color from light to dark to show quantity of something. So we could do, you can see the only number field in there is this total EMP. So if I click on that, it'll give me the small dots in a diverging color ramp, right? Because there's 2. One goes off to green, one goes off to red, right? And that's kind of, instead of a single color ramp, which would go like light green to dark green, diverging is just multiple colors out from the middle. And diverging, you would have, if it made sense to have that. And really all this you can just figure out if you know what kinds of data you're trying to map. Like if you have temperature like hot and cold, right? It makes sense. Hot is red, cold is blue. But then if you have like number of passengers, you probably want to have one color, maybe. So I'll just do light to dark red. And then I'll do that properties for all symbols again. I do this all the time. And I would just make the dots bigger. I guess I can't do that from here. If I go to classify, I think this is where, and this is, if you go to graduated colors in here, it's kind of where a lot of the things the chapter talked about come together, because you have the choice here between a divergent color ramp, like a multicolor ramp, or a single color ramp, graduated color map, or a choropleth map was the other name for a graduated color map. And then if you go to classify, this is where you get those other options like quantile, natural breaks, and that means that's the different ways you're going to separate those colors to become like meaningful classes of data. And they say classes, it's just the name of the groups basically. And this is kind of neat because each of these blue lines represents where a break in classes is going to be. This data is not the best for this, so I'm actually going to look for another data set. Oh, I bet you cities is better for this. Yeah, okay, so we got a lot of cities. And we're going to go First of all, let's look at the attribute table, and we have population, right? So then if we go, we can make a quantity map for the numbers of population. So I went symbology, quantities, and then graduated colors. We're going to do population 2007, and then go to the classify tab. And all I wanted to show you is that you can kind of see the values here are like, you know, they scale up. It's a little graph. But like as you change these things, first of all, notice that natural breaks has like a good grouping of like the naturally different things. Like, you know, you might like, it's some formula, like I don't even know. I mean, this guy Jenks invented it, and it groups them into like humanly recognized clusters. But if you did quantile, it would split them into like 25%, or if you do 5 quantiles, it'll be 20% of the values are in each category. If you did like 4 quantiles, it'd be 25% is in each category. Oop. And if you did like I don't know, 10, then it would be 10% are in each category. It's just that number divided by 100, and that's how many are in each category. So let's look at quantile. Let's look at the difference between these things. So first you can see that it gives me now 10 classes, right? And I can pick the number of classes here. And if I wonder. All right, well, I guess I have to select them and then say properties for selected symbols, and hit OK. All right, so this is with quantile. And then if I, so what I'm going to do, which I do a lot, is I'm just going to copy and paste a layer. And it's just going to be, just so I can show you the difference, but it's going to be looking at the same data, just symbolizing it differently. So I'm going to say right click, copy on the data, and then I'm going to click on layers, which is called your data frame. This is where you put all the different pieces of data you have. And I'm going to do paste, and so now I have an exact copy of what that was. And the only reason I did that was so I can symbolize it differently to show you the difference. So if I go to classify, and then I do, say, Jenks with that many breaks, you can see it's much different, right? So like this one is kind of a jumbled mess of, you know, not really helpful. But if you just do it by Jenks, you can see it kind of separates it into the small, medium, large airports. Jenks is typically a good way to just look at data the first time. But I guess all I wanted to show you guys was, so far, features, you can just change one symbol and they all get symbolized the same way. Categories would be for symbolizing by type, basically. Quantities would be where you go to show differences based on some numerical value, basically. If you switch to graduated symbols, and we'll make another copy of this, I'll just call it like, this one's Jenks. This one is quantile. Quantile just means percentages, basically. And we'll make another one that's going to be graduated symbols. So if you do under quantities, graduated symbols on the population, you can see the symbols just get bigger as the population gets bigger. So you can hit OK. And if you zoom in, you can see the size, they're actually different sizes. Let me put a map on below this and make it a little bit. Alright, so green's not the best on green background, so if you go to the template, you can make it bright yellow is good on air photos. And also, if you change the symbol size, maybe the minimum is 10, and the maximum is like 35, you'll really see the difference in each city. A good trick for graduated symbols is to just do an outline, but in order to do that you have to manually edit each one of these bubbles. It doesn't do it automatically, but then you could have them stacked on top of each other. So that's Jenks for graduated symbols, and that's what that meant kind of in the reading. And then the question about, so we'll say graduated symbols, and we'll show proportional symbols. So if I go in the same thing and under quantities, we have proportional symbols, and I pick the same data, 2007, and I just symbolize it right on that, you can see right away. And conceptually the difference is a little bit, maybe not obvious, but what one of these is doing, let me make it a little bit smaller. So since the difference is so big, it's affecting the way that the map looks. But okay, so the difference here is that one of them is putting all of the cities into one of 10 sizes, right? Like just buckets, basically. The other one is literally like if there's one person in the city, then it's a certain size, but then it scales up the size of the dot up to the biggest size of the city. So like that one, that the smallest one and the biggest one get the smallest and biggest values, and then everything else in between, the size of the circle is actually proportional to what the value is for that city. So it's like it's more precise because if you look at it, you're like, oh, well, obviously that city there is the biggest by far, right? And the other ones are, all over the place. But like if you didn't do it proportionally, you wouldn't really know. I mean, you'd know that there's a lot of people here, but you wouldn't know that that's definitely the biggest one right there. So anyway, in the exercise, we go through kind of setting that up for other data and going through the same thing on your own. But it's kind of a interesting thing to see. But basically, you'll be going in and setting up categories, quantities, and then if you do charts, you can put little pie charts on them, and they just are circles with little multiple values in them, and you can scale them by different sizes. But you see what else I wanted to show you.
Where did you get the world imagery layer from? To get